The genre of horror is made up of a vast expanse of conventions and idiosyncrasies that truly make the genre unique. Between nightmarish characters, secluded settings, suspenseful musical scores, and the typical plot points, horror films come into fruition. If you, as a film student or even a connoisseur of all things horror, wish to create a horror film, consider using the following genre conventions. In horror films, there are normally many fatalities, victims, and innocents that encounter the antagonist. Typically, only one of them is protagonist, although the setup of some films, like those in a past and present sequence, allows for multiple protagonists. The protagonist is whomever in the group has the best chance of survival. Typically, it is a jock and a nerd, but occasionally it will be a scientist, a father, or a housewife. It really depends on the group of victims. The group in comparison should be helpless. Consider making them absolutely pitiful with tons of internal conflict to derail escape efforts. Use children, students, and unironically stupid or whiny characters. Overall, you are looking for a younger population. The chosen protagonist has to be an underdog. You want to utilize the tension created from the uncertainty of their survival. A protagonist in a horror film is severely outmatched and perhaps inhibited by drugs, alcohol, or injury while battling the antagonist. Don't get too attached to this underdog. They almost always die. Often they die last and survive only to be killed suddenly. Occasionally another victim will survive them, slinking off into the darkness to warn others. Conversely, the antagonist is strong, easily identifiable, and the creation of nightmares. Don't be afraid to give your antagonist supernatural abilities. Create demons, ghosts, and mutants to create a sufficient power dynamic. All good horror movies have truly scary antagonists. They should be elusive, powerful, grotesque, and nightmarish. The very sight of them should make your adrenaline kick in, make you sweat a little, even jump. Lastly, and most importantly, don't ever kill your antagonist. It seems wrong, but in horror films, closure and happy endings don't really exist. When a moviegoer leaves the theater, they should worry the antagonist has followed them home. Even if you choose to have an underdog win the match, the solution should be short-term. Give the impression that the antagonist will be back to kill more, perhaps for revenge.
The plot. The plot of a movie consists of important factors, including the background of the characters, a rising action, the climax, the falling action, and finally the resolution. Remember to add certain key focuses in the beginning of the horror movie to early on foreshadow what's to come. First is the exposition. This is when we're introduced to the main characters and their backgrounds. There also starts to be a few setbacks and hints as to what's to come. Next is the rising action. This is where the scary events are starting to get more noticeable and detrimental to the characters. This is also when they all start to realize something's really wrong. Then is the climax. Finally, the characters are confronted with the entity at hand and now need to face it head on. Followed by the climax is the falling action. The falling action involves the fighting off of whatever it is that's after the characters. Normally it involves the death of one of the main characters. And then finally is the resolution. The resolution consists of the characters killing off the thing that was after them and being able to safely go back to their lives and live like normal again.
The setting. The setting of a horror film plays a major role in giving an overall tone to the picture. The chosen setting will solicit a corresponding response and feeling from your audience. The setting can be limitless and set in any number of places or locations. The scope of the setting can also be narrowed to give a feeling of claustrophobia or far-fetched. The setting can be limitless and set in any number of places or locations. The scope of the setting can also be narrowed to give the feeling a claustrophobic feel or far-reaching to show the inescapability of the threat. Typically unsettling, the setting is designed to cause a certain level of unease for the viewer. Secluded residence. The most common setting is typically a residence located in a remote area. This allows any potential danger to be hidden or concealed from the victims as they reside within what most would consider to be a safe space. This is evident in the 1980 film Friday the 13th. In utilizing the lonely nature of this secluded setting, the audience understands that the victims are typically on their own. Forest or woods. Another common setting for the horror genre is your classic remote forest or woods. The unsettling nature of forests is due to their thick or dense qualities that can provide cover for the unseen. This is especially evident at night. Like a secluded residence, this setting is remote in nature and forces the victims to be on their own. There can be a lot of crossover between a secluded residence and forests or woods. This is evident in Drew Goddard's Cabin in the Woods from 2011. This 2011 film was centered around a group of people alone in a cabin deep in a forest. Hospitals or asylums. Care facilities such as hospitals and asylums are also commonly used and effective settings in the horror genre. Most viewers recognize these institutions as places of health and well-being. Preconceived notions by the audience allows the filmmaker to take those safe feelings and force the opposite reaction. When done correctly, your viewers will be subjected to feelings of confusion and possibly unease.
Each filmmaker is specifically responsible for the completion of one important task. No matter if the goal is to create a romantic comedy, scientific fiction, or horror film, in order to be successful, the production staff needs to ensure that the audience is mentally or emotionally involved in the depicted on-screen experience. In order to achieve this goal, filmmakers take advantage of the science of cinematography. Cinematography is known as the art of making motion pictures and happens to be one of the most important skills used during the production of a horror film. Cinematography includes all of the audio and visual components of a film. Some of these elements include lighting, framing, camera motion, camera angles, zoom, focus, and musical scores. Horror movies are not made for everyone, but it is the rush of adrenaline that viewers get by watching them that keeps them coming back for more. This type of rush is built off of the fact that the audience can experience these terrifying situations without actually being subjected to any danger. It is important to keep the audience involved in order to keep them entertained. Using cinematography, horror filmmakers work to achieve viewer involvement and vulnerability in a few vitally important ways. Unconventional camera angles. In order to throw the viewer off balance, the use of unconventional camera angles is frequently utilized in the production of horror films. The use of these odd angles leaves the audience with an unsettling feeling and makes them feel as though something is not right. These moments of confusion subject the audience to vulnerability, which allows them to be taken away from reality and thrown into the terror along with the main characters. Some specific camera angles that are often used in the making of a horror movie are the Dutch tilt, the bird's eye view, the ant's eye view, and the over-the-shoulder shot. Each work in a unique way in order to throw the viewer off balance. Underexposure and low lighting. Darkness is scary, plain and simple. A fantastic element that is often utilized in the development of a horror film is lighting. People are most vulnerable when one or more than one of their 5 senses is/are disabled. When light is removed from a scene, the audience is deprived of their ability to closely evaluate what is going on. This presents an extremely mysterious and unpredictable situation to the viewer. By leaving more areas of the frame in the dark, more is left to the audience's imagination in order for them to fill in the missing puzzle pieces. Gripping musical scores. Music can have a profound effect on human emotion, so horror filmmakers typically take advantage of their musical opportunity to expose their audience. Since the beginning of the existence of horror movies, music has been used to evoke an added emotional response above and beyond what the visuals were capable of. In some cases, Musical scores can be just as, if not more, engaging than the scariest visual component included in a horror film. Nonlinear sounds are those that have a very high amplitude and abrupt changes in frequency. These types of sounds stimulate the primal human fear response and can easily emotionally manipulate the audience when used in conjunction with other elements. The Jaws theme consists of only 2 notes, but the suspense that it creates would be much harder to produce using visual elements. In many horror film scenarios, the effect that music has is unmatched.